The Bible speaks of unusual events taking place in the heavenlies, supernatural occurrences with the sun, the moon, and the stars that directly relate to an important prophetic event in biblical history. As I speak, we may be experiencing such an occurrence today on Jewish Voice. My guest today, Pastor Mark Biltz, stumbled on a profound discovery, a sign the Bible predicted over 2,000 years ago that may be taking place right now as you watch this program, a blood moon or a complete lunar eclipse happening this week, but it's not the only one. Is this phenomenon a warning from God? Please welcome Pastor Mark Biltz. Mark, welcome. I've got to tell you, there hasn't been a topic this compelling since Jonathan Cahn brought us the revelation of the Harbinger. This is absolutely fascinating, and there's so many more people than usual because of this topic. It's absolutely capturing everyone's attention. I want you to begin by talking about events happening in the heavenly bodies, specifically on feast days. So as people are watching, Passover's taking place. Sure. So this is a really key moment.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Jonathan. It's such a blessing to be here. And the amazing thing to me, I think everyone believes the Bible. I mean, if God said it, that settles it, I believe it. And in Genesis 1:14, God said he created the sun and the moon to send signals. It's so missed in our Bible because we have not the best translation in English, because he says he created it for signs and seasons, days and years. But that word season is translated as feast in Leviticus 23. The same Hebrew word. Does it mean fall or food? Well, actually, it's neither. It's the Moedim, or God's divine appointments. I think many of your audience believe in divine appointments, but they don't know their schedule.
Sure do. How many believe in divine appointments? And many of you watching, too. Divine appointment, we all do.
Well, can you believe they're scheduled? They're scheduled divine appointments, and that's what Passover is, one of those scheduled divine appointments. So here in Genesis, God said he created the sun and the moon to send signals on his feast days. And like you said, this week we have a total lunar eclipse blood moon happening on Passover.
As people are watching this program, this is so compelling. I almost don't know where to begin. But tell us where you began. How did you, I want to avoid saying stumbling into all this, but this is like a detective experience. You trace this down. So wherever this ends up, it's an amazing story. How did you come into all this?
In 2008, I saw a total lunar eclipse over the Temple Mount. And I was just thinking how beautiful it was. And then, of course, the scriptures like Luke 21:25, where Jesus said there will be signs.
Wait, you saw this where? Literally? Or
literally. It was on the internet, and it was on Purim. Okay, this is on Purim in March of 2008. And this beautiful total red blood moon over the Temple Mount. It was on the internet. And I was thinking, man, that is so cool. And I think of Revelation and Isaiah and Joel, where it talks about the moon turning to blood. Well, that's what a total lunar eclipse is, a blood red moon. So I went to NASA's website just to see if there was any interesting eclipses over the next decade. Because God created everything so scientifically and mathematically, NASA literally has 5,000 years of eclipses. They know exactly to the day where they're going to occur, how long they're going to occur.
I want to understand that clearly. NASA is able to actually go back for 5,000 years and say on this specific date, 4,200 years ago, on this Thursday, there was a full eclipse of the moon.
I think they go back to 2000 BC and forward to 3000 AD. So it's like 5,000 years.
To the day.
Yes. Yeah,
wow, I heard a wow in the audience.
That is math.
Incredible.
That is science. And so it's just following the math. And so when I saw in 2014 and 2015, there were these 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. And I never thought much more about it, but I thought, wow, how often does that happen? And so I looked, and it didn't happen at all in the 1800s. It didn't happen in the 1700s. It didn't happen in the 1600s. So I'm thinking, well, hey, this is kind of interesting. And one night, I would always get up early in the morning. and pray. I was inspired to pray in my prayer closet, which is literally my walk-in closet. And I was just praying in there about 4 a.m. And as I'm thinking about this thought came to me: you need to put this on the biblical calendar. Because when I was looking at NASA, I was looking at April and September, or April and October. And so I thought, okay. So I went to my software and I put it on the biblical calendar.
Because that's God's calendar.
And that's God's calendar. And I noticed it fell on Passover and Tabernacles 2 years in a row. And then I was like doing a hallelujah dance. I just could not believe
What
this.
an amazing revelation. And it just came to you to do that.
It just came to me to put it on the biblical calendar. And when I did that, I saw it and I thought, oh my goodness, how often do you get 4 blood moons in a row, number one? And then on top of that, what are the odds of having these 4 in a row on the feast days? So I went back and looked and saw it happen twice in the 1900s. 1967 and 68 when Israel captured Jerusalem. And then again, right after they became a nation in 1948, in 1949 and 1950. And then I was just floored.
So you found that it only happened right after Israel became a nation and right after Jerusalem came back under the control of the Jewish people.
And so
all prophesied.
Yeah, and so I see Genesis 1:14 and I'm thinking, good grief. He literally meant what he said.
Hey, we have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk specifically about what blood moons are and what this all means. Don't go away. Explain to us more clearly what a blood moon is.
I think one of the things that make him significant to begin with is the fact that God said he created him to send signals. So that makes him significant. Then what makes it more significant in decoding these heavenly signs is when they fall on the feast days. When you look at NASA's website, it lists approximately 12,000 lunar eclipses over 5,000 years. Okay, so that means there's a little over 2 a year. Okay, if there's 5,000 years times 2, that's 10,000. Well, there's 12,000 lunar eclipses.
Just any kind of eclipse, right?
Yes. The difference is this: a total lunar eclipse, it would be the blood red moon, but you can also have a partial lunar eclipse where only half the moon is covered and it doesn't turn that blood red. Then
a blood moon is a full eclipse of the moon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's a total lunar eclipse. Then they have what's called a penumbral lunar eclipse, where it's more grayish. It doesn't go through the Earth's umbra, just the penumbra, and so doesn't turn that blood red. So basically, you have 3 types of lunar eclipses. Right? I love math, and according to NASA, there's 12,000 lunar eclipses over 5,000 years, but only about 3,700 were total lunar eclipses.
Okay.
So that just dropped the odds down.
Got it.
Okay.
We're cutting this down.
You have 5,000 years, approximately 3,700 total lunar eclipses, which means that averages only 1 every year and a half. All right? Well, here you have 4 total lunar eclipses in a year and a half. So that raised the statistical odds just huge. Then on top of that, they're falling on the Jewish feast days. That raises it even more. Then on top of that, the last total lunar eclipse in 2015 not only is a total blood moon, but it is at perigee. And what I mean by that is this. Here's the Earth. The moon's orbit is elliptical. So sometimes it's real close, sometimes it's far away. It does that every month, okay? When the moon is at its closest point to the Earth, that's when it is at perigee. But let's look at the odds for a minute. Not always is it a full moon at perigee. Sometimes it's a new moon, you can't even see it. But if it is a full moon at perigee, then it's called a supermoon. It appears like 14% larger, according to NASA, because it's so close. It just appears larger. Well, here's the thing. Not only is the total lunar eclipse at perigee, it is at its closest point for the entire year, not just that month. So here you're going to have a total blood...
On Sukkot.
On Sukkot, you're going to have a total red blood moon that is seen in Jerusalem on Sukkot. That is a super blood moon. When all the Jews are out in their sukkahs looking up at the stars, they're going to see a super blood moon over Jerusalem, and there's more.
I'm getting goosebumps. and these are facts. We are talking about facts. Before we get into what it all means, these are the facts.
These are the facts.
And the odds are getting greater and greater. You have any numbers? You're a math man.
Well, not that good. But here's the thing that's amazing. According to the Torah, only the men had to appear in Jerusalem 3 times a year for the feast. But at the end of the Shemitah year, at the end of the 7th year, every man, woman, child, even the stranger had to appear and hear the king of Israel read from the Torah.
Let me guess, 2015.
Is the end of a Shemitah year. So here you have yes. So look at these odds. You have a super blood moon seen in Jerusalem on Sukkot at its closest point to earth when everyone's looking at it, and it is at the end of a Shemitah year when all believers are assembled to hear the king of Israel.
You mentioned the word tetrad.
Yes.
Which I know is 4. Expound on that.
Sure. What NASA calls a tetrad is when you have 4 total lunar eclipses or 4 blood moons in a row without having a partial lunar eclipse or a penumbral lunar eclipse in between. And that has only happened 8 times in 2,000 years.
The odds are just stacking up.
Yes.
And they haven't connected this to the Jewish calendar, of course.
Right.
But when you superimpose the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar, God's calendar, Passover, Sukkot, the last one being a
super blood moon at the end of a Shemitah year. And what's absolutely incredible, it's not just 4 blood moons. God said he created them for signs on his feast days. Do you know, in 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, there were solar lunar eclipses on all the feast days in 69, 70, and 71 AD, eclipses surrounding the destruction of the temple.
The signs are there. Let those have ears to hear and eyes to see, hear and see. And by the way, I want to remind you, as this program is airing, the first of the 4 is actually taking place either tomorrow or a few days after you watch this. This is incredible. Now, let's talk about what meaneth this.
Sure.
What I really like in getting to know you and talk about this is you're just pointing out the facts.
Right.
Here's a fact of Scripture, okay? And this is when I heard blood moon, and I'm sure many of you, same thing, you immediately thought of Joel chapter 2. And let me just read this. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood. I never understood that before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Good news follows, by the way. I'd better read it. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. I don't want to, in a program like this, we don't want to leave that out. That's why we're here. And then Acts chapter 2, it's repeated in 2:19 and 20. Joel's repeated where Peter is proclaiming, I will show wonders in the heavens and above, signs on the earth below, fire, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord. And then he says, of course, repeats, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. 3,000 get saved.